I am so sorry. Hello. Again, my name is Ochumare, and welcome to our panel, Creating Spaces for Trans Youth. We're joined today by our dog Sasuke, and I want to bring in a really important facet of our work, which is our land acknowledgement. Okay. Before we begin today's program, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are hosting this event. The New Haven Pride Center was founded and operates on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scotticoke, Golden Hill Pagasaw, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac peoples. We hope that from wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the native place and people whose land you occupy and the history of the place you are in. Find out more at Native Land. Find out more about Native Lands, native-land.ca. And before we bring on our panelists, I would like to also take a moment to thank Brandon and Simone for coordinating our ASL interpreting and all of the amazing interpreters that support our work here at New Haven Pride Center. I also want to take one more second and thank our sponsors, because without them, we would not be here and we would not be able to create this amazing panel for you today. And so I would like to thank the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, the Avangrid Foundation, and Center for Advanced Reproductive Services. Today, I'm going to introduce to you our first amazing panelist, and their name is Mel. You want to bring Mel on? Hi, Mel. Would you just mind sharing your name and sharing your name and pronouns for everyone? We're going to get into the meat of who you are once the panel starts.
Okay, so I'm Mel, I use they, them.
Thank you. And I'm going to bring on our next panelist, Tony.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tony Ferraiolo. My pronouns are he, him, his.
Thank you. I'm going to bring on our next panelist, Christian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christian. My pronouns are any, preferably they.
And last, but certainly not least, our panelist, Jahnice.
Hello. My name is she, her, hers.
Thank you so much. And we are going to hopefully have an amazing discussion that is full of all kinds of investigations and hopefully some solutions for those of us who are watching, who really, really want to know what are the existing spaces for trans and non-binary folks, and how we can go about making sure that we co-create really, really safe spaces for our community, for these members of our community. And so I want to bring on, oh yes, one second. As you can see down below us, if you have any questions, please share with them, whether you're joining us on YouTube or whether you're joining us on social media. And our amazing producers will make sure that I get it so that we can ask your question. We are in community, and whether you are joining us in our studio or you're joining us through social media, you're viable, we see you, and we need you to make this conversation even better. So I want to dive into letting our folks in the community who have not, I don't know how, but have maybe don't know you amazing folks on this panel. And so I'm going to ask you folks to give us just a little bit about yourselves. We all know that you're experts because the Pride Center has identified you, right? And so like, what about you? What brings you here to this space? What is your message? What is your favorite quote that we can give to our community to just introduce yourselves in a little bit of a different way? They can Google you folks because you folks are change makers out here. So what is something that our our community should know about you that would share a little bit about you? And I'm going to throw you in the hot water, Mel. You're first.
I was over here like, okay, you brought me on first. You're not going to make me introduce first. But you are. Okay, that's fine.
You know you're one of my favorite people, and I really like when you drop the bomb. So we're going to start with you dropping that bomb on what I think it's supposed to be and and name it for what it is.
I needed a minute to come up with a good quote or something. I'm not ready for that one.
I will give you a second because that's what you requested. Tony, can I throw it at you?
Absolutely.
I knew I can.
Well, first of all, I'm really super excited to be here. My name is Tony Ferraiolo, and I just recently became the director of Healthcare Advocate International's Youth and Family Program in January. Super excited, wonderful organization. The most kindest, compassionate organization I've ever had the privilege to work with. But prior to my role as their director in 2005, I transitioned. And when I transitioned here in New Haven, I didn't know any trans people. It was a very scary, emotionally damaging time in my life. And after my first surgery, when I really felt like I can actually live again, I said to myself, wow, if I didn't know any trans people, then young trans and non-binary probably don't know any trans people. And in 2008, I started support groups for transgender and non-binary kids and their families. We're still running 13 years later, and it's a free program, and we've served over 1,000 families. My favorite quote, and it's not even really a quote, it's something I try to say to everyone. A lot of times young kids in our community are beaten down by people who just don't understand them, or people who are holding them to what they feel their life should be. And that's typically when we lose them to, emotional pain or even suicide attempts and sometimes suicide. But if you give a child hope for a better life, they won't want to take their life. It has been proven since I've been doing this work that when you acknowledge someone, anyone, and says, okay, listen, I hear you. I believe you. I'm here for you. You can save their life just by doing that. So I guess my message is don't hold people to your agenda. Allow them to walk their agenda and walk their truth. That's it. That's all I have for now. As you know, I'm chatty, so I'm just going to stop.
That was amazing, and that is going to be something that I know is echoed a lot, and that same sentiment is echoed a lot amongst everyone here in this space. So I'm gonna give you one more second, Mel, because I'm gonna throw it to Christian and I'm upset the system, and then I'm coming back to you.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. Sorry if I look a mess. My name is Christian, as you guys know. I guess what set me apart is I was one of the very first and few non-binary individuals at my school, so it was a struggle doing that, and president of my LGBTQ club and trying to fight for making sure that our voices are heard in the school. And I don't know, I guess my message to everyone is embrace your differences and embrace who you are and live true to who you are and just love yourself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. That is beautiful. And Christian, you know you don't look a mess, but you're fine, so cut it out. Anyway, Mel.
Okay, hi. I'm Mel. I use they, them. We're just talking about like where we came from, I guess. I don't know. I've been doing queer youth work since I was a queer kid, and I guess I just felt like I was good at it, so I didn't stop doing it. I don't know. Started in high school. My I guess big push into the activist sphere of things in college was when we did a lot of work on our campus climate, school environment, and improved campus for queer youth, not just at that school, but as it turned out on colleges throughout the state, and updated some of that state level stuff. So that was very cool. After that, I've been doing youth and GSA support with different nonprofits for the past 5 years or so, including New Haven Pride Center sometimes. And 2 years ago, I founded my own youth grassroots space to kind of fill the gaps we were seeing in the youth work being done in other spaces. And as of 2 months ago, that's now my full-time gig. So that's pretty much where we are now. So that's Q+. I'll talk more about that later, I'm sure. And I didn't come up with a quote, but I wanted to share with y'all. So one of my groups that we run is a support group where we're talking about self-affirmations and like what we use to guide our decision making. And I was thinking about like, that's changed for me recently. And I started looking at letting my decisions be made based on my values, not based on my fears of what could happen. And that has been changing a lot of things for me. So that's the like energy I'm going to give y'all right now.
Ashe, Ashe. I love that. Don't move around your fears. Move according to your integrity and your character. I'm telling you, that's what I started doing. You'll be leaving so many people with their own BS. You'll be like, that's not even mine. Let me keep it and remain cute. Keep it cute, right? So speaking of keeping it real cute, we're gonna ask our last but definitely not least again panelists to introduce yourself a little bit to these folks who may not know you.
Hey everyone, Jahnice again, she, her pronouns. I am the current Director of Organizing for the Citywide Youth Coalition. I'm also the co-founder and director of the Connecticut Black and Brown Queer Camp with the amazing Juan Carlos and Ala. Thank you both. But yeah, this work is really so important, especially of creating spaces for trans and non-binary young people. For me, as a young trans woman who is unapologetically Afro-Boricua, it was important to create spaces that I wish were available to me and spaces that I desired to be in. And that's really what I let drive the work I do, to really just create spaces for this younger generation that I wish I had access to. And a quote that's really been laying heavy on my spirit lately, and you all will hear a bit more about it tonight on the Author's Talk with Andrea Jenkins from the Tea is Not Silent book, is the tea is no longer going to be silent. And Jen and Mark said that. So that's been laying heavy in my spirit and thinking about carrying that more into the work that we do.
Thank you. I'm currently being told off by a 16-week-old puppy. So I'm like, what is happening? He's flipping out on me. Anyways, and thank you so much for your introductions, because that actually leads me into my first question. And I want to just ground us in this first question because I want to get right into the meat, right? Normally I'm like, what? Why do we need, but no, we know why we need these spaces, and we know why we need safe spaces. And so I want to talk about, unfortunately, because I want to end on joy. So I want to talk about some of the hardness and the difficulties that we face as actually all 5 of us like do this work from different points of inception and different reasons, but the different reasons all kind of are in the same sentence, if that makes sense. And so what I've noticed is, what I think is because there's not a singular definition of what it means to be trans or what it means to be non-binary. And those 2 lived experiences are different. And let's set a memorandum in this space today that we're going to honor the existence and the similarities of both those lived experiences, but also the differences and the way that those 2 lived experiences face different kinds of erasure. And so in honoring that and knowing how does conflating the lived experiences of non-binary and trans folks conflating it in LGBT spaces, right? Like how does that create hardships for you folks when trying to create centered spaces for those identities? And if you haven't, I would love to hear how and why. Can you give us your tricks? And if you have, what are those things that you have come up with or come up against rather, and how did you get around them, or what are you currently doing? And maybe what help do you need from the larger community to get through them? Does that question make sense for folks?
maybe it didn't make sense.
Okay, I was gonna say I got really wordy, so I'm like, and it's like a paragraph on my paper, so I'm like, let me figure it. Okay, no. So due to what I have noticed in my creation of work for queer identities, when I want to create niche spaces for the various lived experiences under the LGBTQIA plus beautiful rainbow, right? I have noticed, not at the Pride Center is the only place, but I have noticed I receive a lot of pushback when I want to create trans-centered spaces or non-binary centered spaces. And the pushback is not that I want to create it, because I often find the facilitator that's of those lived experiences to do it, so I'm not practicing oppression. So I know that that's not the thing. And I'm wondering if you folks have come up against that challenge and that pushback when you're creating your spaces and you're doing your work. And if so, can you highlight them? And if not, can you also highlight why you think that you haven't? And I'm going to take care of my puppy.
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I haven't run into that. Back in 2008, when I started these programs, from the beginning, they've been closed programs. They're not, you can't just join the program. You have to either call me or Don, who facilitates the parent group, and we have to interview you to make sure. When we were in a space, we never disclosed the location of our meetings. Unfortunately, it's gotten a tad better, but you know, in 2008, 2009, you heard of people hunting down trans people coming out of support groups. I take a very big responsibility that, listen, I have kids as young as 4 years old in that art group that I run, and there's no way anybody's going to come in and harm them. So from the beginning, and that has not changed, everybody's interviewed. You have to fit in within the age range, and the location is not disclosed. And now we're over Zoom, and we never keep the same Zoom link. It changes every time we have a meeting.
I would say to the part of conflating the two identities of like non-binary and trans within the work rate, and it being sometimes hard to create programming specifically for just trans youth or just non-binary youth. My struggle has been, right, like a lot of people do conflate the two, and then we're inherently just erasing people by conflating these two identities, right? And it's also dehumanizing to conflate the two and erase people from this work. So I think that's always been my struggle, right? I like to see and allow people to bring themselves as their full self. And by conflating the two identities, we're only erasing people.
Yeah. Anyone else want to answer that? Yes, the erasure is, I think, what I was really trying to get at. Okay, well, let's go on, right? I have lots of things, and I never get to all my questions, so I'm like jumping around. It's exciting, right? So I think I want to get back into the erasure within our queer community. I want to center us talking about in our queer community and knowing that when we are inclusive of the straights, like erasure of all our identities is guaranteed. But for me, really stepping into leadership, into queer organizing and queer work, I am still very mollified and harmed, even though it's not of my lived experience to be a trans person or a non-binary person. I'm very harmed with the erasure of and the anti-transness that I see within our community, and the rhetoric and the holding on to like capitalism and patriarchy in that way. And directly in all of your work, you work outside of those systems. You've created those spaces. You've done that work. And so selfishly, I would ask someone like me who hasn't been doing who's been working in our queer organizing in our queer spaces for like 2-3 years now, what advice do you have for someone who is not a non-binary person or not a trans person who was like having this experience? What do I do as an ally? I know not how not to be oppressive, right? But what do I do in the spaces that I'm in queer communities? What do I say? Do you have tips, tricks? And I'm sure a lot of folks in the community are really interested in like what you folks can share with us.
I feel like for me, the best advice is don't be a cis savior. A lot of people see trans people and non-binary people, and they're like, I'm woke. I'm this. I know about these things, and I want to be able to protect and defend these people. But they take that and the education that they have, and they turn to something else. It's okay to advocate for people, but I feel like we should also understand that these are these are trans lives, and these are non-binary lives, and we should let people give them the platform to advocate for themselves and not feel the need to constantly have a savior complex in any way.
Great. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, don't stand in front of us, when you're trying to, be an advocate. Stand beside us, or sometimes maybe a little bit behind us, with your hand on our back, saying, I got you just in case you need me. A lot of times what happens is, like Christian said, people just jump in and they're like, hey, don't, if I'm standing there and something's going down, read my vibe. I typically can take care of myself, but absolutely, we need allies. And all I gotta say, I just have the pleasure of working with you a few times. I love you. I think you're awesome, and I'm so glad that you are in these spaces, honestly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm still struggling with removing shame. Like when people like, thank you, I'm like, we all should be in this space. We would be so further along.
Just say you're welcome.
Thank you, you're welcome. My therapist says that, and I'm sure she would be upset if she heard me say that sentence I just said. Like, what is wrong with you?
Well, I had a hard time with that at the beginning. Honestly, when parents were saying, thank you for saving my child's life, I didn't know what to say. Mel's shaking her head because I know Mel knows the same thing. And it's like, yeah, no worries. But then I realized that when somebody is giving you that compliment and that energy, for me to just say, yeah, don't worry about it, it's okay, I'm negating that for them, right? So if I just said, you're welcome, it's my honor, that's what I say, because it truly is an honor to do this work. Everybody gets the energy out of it. Anyways, but
okay, thank you for the short counseling session that we had in the middle of the panel.
No charge.
Hey, free counseling. Mel, did you want to share? I saw you like feeding off of Tony's response.
I'm strongly relating to that, like having a parent or somebody say like, thank you for doing this like really serious thing, like saving this kid's life or this, that. And I'm just like, no, it's just what we do. Like, don't make it a big thing, but it is a big thing. Like, that is why we do what we do, because that's the literal impact. So I really liked the way that you were like, okay, I just say thank you, it's my honor, because that's acknowledging it's a big deal, but not taking like quote unquote credit for being the connector. That's kind of what I see myself doing a lot of time, is being the connector to a specific space, specific resource, whatever it is. So I liked that. For your question about like allyship, what can you do? I want to echo the kind of vibe of like, don't take us on as personal projects, don't speak for us, but also keep in mind that as a cis person, you have access to spaces we don't. And there are times where it's going to be you in a room full of cis people and somebody's going to be making fun of the entire concept of gender, like transition, whatever it is. I don't know. They're going to make a crack about some celebrity, whatever it is. You have an opportunity that none of us do. So what you say there is what really matters, because that's what you're doing. You're not in front of us. You're not getting credit. You're not like showing off. You're in a space that we don't even have access to. So you're the only person in that room who gets to choose whether or not we're represented. That's really where a powerful moment is.
I call that a super duper ally. When you're levels for communities, when they're not standing right next to you. That is awesome, Mel. Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like really real. Really real. And what I noticed for queer folks, right? Like if we're in a space, and I'm in a lot of queer spaces now, right? But what I've come to learn is like transness and non-binariness is not, you don't look at a person and be like, oh, that person is trans, that person is non-binary. And so for me, like in those spaces, I also think that like there's a concept of passability that I just won't ever understand. And I can have all my own opinions, but it's not my lived experience. So I really got to shut up when it comes to that and like create space for folks who want to talk about it and want and like and create that space, furnish that space, make sure the snacks are there or whatever, right? Like, but what I've come to realize and doing that interruption that you spoke about, Mel, is like I'm just doing it because like I give calls and I'm like, if anybody wants to tell anybody else, but I also realize that sometimes if you pause too long, you're forcing a person to have to out themselves in order to protect their larger community. So that pause for me is like, I'm gonna take my time and make sure that I'm not being like paternalistic and oppressive, right? And then I'm gonna pause and I'm like, okay, well now I'm gonna tell you off because like I don't know who's in the space. And as an ally and folks who are also allies, I encourage you to do that as well. Practice whatever you have to practice giving space, but also know that trans bodies and non-binary bodies and folks like that's a stereotype that we have to let go as cishet presenting queer folks, right? Like you have to just, it doesn't matter if they're in the room, you give them space, but you're asking them, you're practicing oppression, being like, well, if they're in the room and they're not talking, then, you know, like they could out themselves and then be murdered after that meeting, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas we can just be deemed the problematic Black woman. The difference. It's a big difference. I want to offer Jahnice, if you had anything to say around that. You kind of said it in your first comment, but before we move on, I want to honor your space and your time.
No, yeah, I would just echo to really for allies to leverage their privilege, and you know, really, I see it similar to like the work of anti-racism, right? And I think the most important work as an ally is holding those close to you accountable, right? And I like Tony said, right, a super duper ally, and I think that's the most important work, right? I think that's how we begin to change as a society when we're having those really tough conversations with those close to us.
Thank you for that. And if does anyone have anything they want to feed off or share before? Yes, Sarah, that comment is beautiful. What Sarah shared, don't grab the mic, but use your perspective and your privilege. Us queer cis folks, we still have a lot of privilege. And then if you add intersections of race and gender in that of how you're presented to the world, right? Like we have a privilege and it's our duty, if we want to fight the straights, to fight the internalized anti-queerness and anti-transness that we have and that we had to get rid of before we came out, right? Like we, and you know, queer folks were always coming out, but for some reason, I have never seen a queer person have to come out as much as I have seen trans folks have to come out. Like sometimes you folks have to come out like 17 times. I would just be cussing people out at the end. Like the ancestors knew what I could deal with and what my personality couldn't, because I would just be angry that like, do I need to work around with a shirt? But you can have a shirt on that says I'm trans. Don't ask me any questions. And somehow, some way, folks will find a way.
No, absolutely.
To make me say I'm trans, even though this shirt is a coming out shirt. And so that leads me into my next question. How do we create a space for our young folks? And Christian and Jahnice, because you're on the younger folks, I would really love your weigh in on this. How do we create a truly safe space for non-out trans and non-binary young folks, so that way we can begin to thwart the emotional unwellness that happens from society when realizing that folks told you that you're somebody that you're not?
Yeah, so as you know, we've had to deal with this a couple of times at queer camp, and you know, it's been beautiful to just see a lot of these young people come in identifying as like queer, whatever, and then 2 years later they're like, "Yep, I'm a trans man," right? Like it's beautiful to see that and to see people just flourish into their true selves. I think what's been most important about it is um, education. I think is a very big thing, right? And being able to have the conversations around gender and sexuality and how they're different, and the fact that it is a very large spectrum, right? And it's okay to like fall somewhere in it and not necessarily know where. um I think another thing that has been important specifically in our work is sharing the stories of other trans people, and how they came to their journey. And I think that's also been right, and it's weird to say that in 2021. But part of the issue has been that there hasn't been a lot of trans representation in the media and in the larger society. So I think that's been part of our work as well, to make sure that we are exposing those young people to it. But there's also a lot of work of healing that has to be done. Um, Around the traumas that we have received through society. So I think that's like the other big thing, right? Allowing space and time for us to heal as a community together to then be able to flourish into our full selves.
Flourish into your full selves. I just cannot wait until the whole world gets to do that, so they can leave. We can other people to leave other people's bodies alone. Like, figure out what's happening for you, so you can stop worrying about my private parts, right? Like, does anyone have anything else they want to offer? Christian, did you want to answer that? You don't have to, but I just want to make sure that I make space for you, though.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit. So from my personal experience, make sure to build a connection with this person. Well, you always need to build connections with everyone, no matter what. But be understandable of their situation, seeing that some people have certain parents with certain beliefs and parents that don't really align with what they identify as. So be respectful of that and understanding of that, and ask them, hey, listen, okay, so I know that you go by these pronouns when in school, or you go by this name. Um, do you want me to refer to you as that with your parents? Because I don't want to out you. I don't want to put you in a situation where you're uncomfortable. And having those conversations with queer people in general is very important, whether they are cis or not cis. It's important because you never know. Because maybe the person in the future might identify as such and would feel comfortable enough to sit down and speak with you.
Kel Craig had an amazing comment. We see you, Kel, and it actually leads me to one of my questions. So I'm going to go to that question next after I give these folks space to finish answering this question.
Yeah, so I just want to just add this. You know, I learned very early on in the work with, you know, giving safe spaces to trans and non-binary youth that I wasn't going to hold them to my agenda. That none of our groups have an agenda. We start with highlight, low light, and we applaud the highlights, and we certainly talk about the lowlights. And it's never a facilitator who says, hey guys, listen, this is what you need to do. It's the members of the group that give the advice to the other members of the group on how they maybe navigated through that difficulty. Something else that I really paid attention to early on was their cries for help when it came to parents not being understanding, schools not being accepting, and healthcare providers not giving them the care. So we train healthcare providers, we train schools and everyone else, and I have going to be doing a workshop for parents very soon called From Fear to Acceptance, because I also think when parents aren't accepting, we need to meet them where they are and bring them up to where they need to be, because typically it's fear-based And that causes a lot of, and they're not educated either. So, not holding your groups and that space to what you think it should be, and always remembering that your groups and spaces belong to the members of that group.
Yes, Mel felt me on that one because Mel did my finger point. I be finger pointing the whole panel, but Mel got the finger up.
That might be your fault I do this now. I just picked that up from you. It might be.
Because I'm an interrupter, so I have to use my body language to be like, I second, third, 100th.
Exactly. Like you're supporting it without interrupting it. That's basically all I want. I agree with a lot of what you were saying. I feel like the general big secret to youth work that adults don't think about is talk to the youth in front of you about what they actually need and what they actually define safety as. If you want a space to be safe for queer youth, ask queer youth why they're not in it. They'll tell you. It doesn't have to be a big secret. It's just that you're not asking. So ask them what that means. Ask them what they need for a space to be safe. And then do that even if it doesn't make sense to you. So we do name and pronoun every time, even if it's just the youth who work there that night. We still do it because it establishes a norm. You can change your name and pronoun any day, any week. We'll just update ourselves. That'll be that. Do those things to create norms. If you know that there's one kid who's super anxious and needs an icebreaker, so they can remember people's names, or needs a trigger warning for a certain thing, whatever it is, whatever the accommodation is that they were afraid to ask for, make that what you center. Let them define what's necessary for the space, and then the place will be theirs, not yours. So long rambling way to kind of say what you were saying, just looking at it, how to structure it.
And what I noticed that, I'm not sure Mel or anybody else on the panel, if all of you have noticed, but we moved very quickly to Zoom when COVID hit. Okay, so we didn't skip a beat. And typically we have about 20, 30 kids that come to the support group, the teen support group. What I noticed on Zoom, and this was pretty powerful, and I'm not sure if I'll ever get off of Zoom now, is that the children who struggle with social anxiety, the kids who would never be able to walk in to a space and sit with comfort, are now able to come into the support group through Zoom, keep their cameras off and muted, and we have them raise their hand if they don't want to be called on. So now we've created a safe space for them, and they get the support. It's just like Yale Psych Hospital, the adolescent unit. I used to go up there. Now they have the kids Zoom me, the trans and non-binary kids that are up there for suicide attempts and stuff like that. So Zoom, even though everybody's like, the energy, I don't feel the energy. In some cases, it can be very, very helpful to really include everyone who needs support and maybe doesn't have the emotional capacity to be in a physical space. Yeah.
The fact that you don't feel the energy the same way is what makes that accessible to some people. So just tacking right onto that, that
yes,
is way more accessible for a lot of folks because of that, because of location. There's a lot of folks who cannot just get a ride to one of the major cities to attend a youth support group on a Wednesday night, but they can get on Zoom. So.
And add that a lot of young folks are not out to their parents because it's not always safe. That is hopefully a norm that is being flipped on its head with the newer generation of young of parents, and not even just young parents, but a lot of folks who are having kids and young and little people now I see are starting to do stuff like use they until their young person is able enough to tell them who they are, right? And giving them gender neutral names. So if they come out, they can keep their name that they've had their whole life and they really like, or, and then they can say, well, I never really liked this name anyway, right? But having more choice. I think what I heard so much is what I really want to highlight for folks who may have just tuned in or needing to go backwards and rewind is normalizing checking in with these young folks, normalize letting young people run the young people space. It is our job as the older youth. I'm an older youth, right? It's our job as the older youth to cultivate safety in that so that folks it won't be abnormal for folks to be like, yeah, actually, no, my pronouns are this and this and this. But that interruption of someone mispronouncing you, if they haven't had practice in a safe space, it is a burden for that person to now be going and educating someone who instead of saying, you know, I don't know your pronouns, what are your pronouns? Or, hey, I don't know your pronouns, what's your name, right? Like those things. And so just normalizing creating safety and normalizing letting young people say what they want. I heard so much from everyone actually, like letting young people, and I think it's the like button, man. I think we're hitting the like button when we're pointing or something, or like the love button. We have been institutionalized into social media. And I want to get to Kel's question, and then we had another question from the audience too. Thank you so much, folks that are just joining us. Throw those questions in the chat boxes because we are going to get to them. Kel Craig asked an amazing question that I'm excited for. Parents, certain parents want to, well, they didn't ask the question. I'm turning it into a question, right? Certain parents want to like fight the world. They're like, you're Batman, I'm Robin. You know what I mean? Like we're right here, we're going at it. And oftentimes like what we see sometimes is like a little bit of paternalism or like, you know, overprotection, where you haven't really checked in with your young person. That's like, do you want me to go into the school and cuss everybody out and out you to every administrator? Or do you want us to find you a better space to go to school at? What is it that you want? And so that's kind of like my answer. My answer is ask the young people what they want, right? But what do you have as tips, tricks, things for parents, or just a good old read for the parents, though, who are accepting, but sometimes get a little outrageous with the like wanting to take on the world and forgetting that their person is the actual human?
I have a tip. I get this all the time. Honor your child's journey. They know what they need. Ask them. It is up to them whether, and here's a big one, parents, and listen, I know that it's never done with any ill intent, and this tip comes from my heart with kindness. I want to put that through. Don't disclose your child's dead name to anyone. Anyone. Not even me. A lot of parents think it's okay to tell me. I don't want to know it. The only time you should use it is if it's a legal document and it has to be put on a legal document. Or ask your kiddo, you know, is it okay that I use your birth name? There's a reason why they call it their dead name. And one of the reasons is because anytime it's said to them, they feel like they're dying inside. So honor that, please. I mean, you know, there's a lot of stuff around their birth name, but you really need to honor their journey and ask them. It's going to keep them emotionally healthy.
Yeah, I would say someone who does this so well is Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle Union, right? We've seen people drag their daughter Zaya Wade and completely disrespect her online and social media, and we have rarely ever seen Dwayne Wade or Gabrielle Union actually step in and like try to take on the world while trying to defend their daughter. And I think they just do it so beautifully, right? And I think recently Dwayne Wade finally came out and did an interview, but he was very respectful in it and making sure that he like constantly was saying like they're led by their daughter Zaya Wade, and that's who they look up to as far as like what to say, what not to say, right? So I think it's just that, right? Like listen to your young person and make sure to respect their journey.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I had a young person tell me when we had this discussion about the dead name thing, and they were like, you know, I love you and I want to share this with you, that I had to kill a part of myself to become who you are seeing right now. I don't need you invoking ghosts of other people's expectations and other people's genitalia and other people's stories and memories. I need you to see me and acknowledge that I had to kill off a portion of myself. I had to grieve that person. I had to realize, you know, that I had to kill the patriarchy inside me. And as my quote that I got from another trans person is smash the patriarchy inside yourself, right? Like they had to date folks who have to kill themselves. And so that's why the gravity, I wanted to share that for folks. Like, folks are like, that's extreme, you have to kill. But sometimes, you know, in this apathetic world, we need to be very like, this is the extremity of it, right? And so then folks can be like, oh, okay, now I get it. Don't use the dead name. But that is from a trans person who had to go through it by themselves as a young person and figure it out, and then were able to create spaces for young trans folks. And that is what she teaches her young folks when they're going through the processes of becoming and deciding to live. When folks come out and make a decision, non-binary and trans folks are deciding to live in a world that every day tries to kill them, whether it's, you know, emotionally or physically. And as an ally, it is our job to take all those little things, not be another person to stab someone that you love in the back.
Yeah.
And with that being said, oh, Tony, did you have something you want to say?
No.
We had a question from our amazing audience that asked, what is your advice to people who are forgetful about pronouns? Like, do you folks have any tips?
I do. Sorry. Yeah, so here's the reality of it. It's not okay. So I used to train, if you make a pronoun mistake, apologize sincerely and move on. I do not train like that anymore, okay? Because when we do that, then you're putting the trans or non-binary person in the position to make you feel better about what you just did. And they're gonna say, no, it's okay, and it's not okay. There's a space in our brain between stimulation and reaction. I call it the power of the pause, and you need to pay attention to that. And you need not to speak until you are clear what you're gonna say, okay? So let's talk about it for a second. You know, when you misgender someone and they correct you, thank them for correcting you and move on. What you're doing in that case is you're saying to the trans or non-binary person, I see you, I hear you, and I honor you, okay, period. You're not saying, oh my God, I'm sorry. And then they're gonna say, oh no, it's okay, and it's not okay. So, and especially, let's talk about trans youth. Let's talk about the young beings that have no control over anything else in their lives, but call me Tony and call me he. They don't have control over what their bodies are doing. They don't have control over medical decisions that are being made for them, or what schools and bullies are doing to them. The only thing in their young little lives they have control over is call me Tony and call me he, their name and their pronoun. And that can shift them into a happier being. So please, out there, power of the pause. Power of the pause. That's it. That's my tip.
I want to honor the space of you folks' lived experience before I share my tip, because I have one too. You know, I always got something to say. Tony, me and you, all of us, we the 5 biggest mouths in some of the 5 biggest mouths in Connecticut. Mel, you're muted.
Of course I'm muted. Why wouldn't I be muted? Now I don't even remember what I was going to say. I had something on the pronoun thing. I want to echo what Tony said. I think saying thank you is a really great way to like train your brain into appreciating the correction instead of getting defensive. So I think that's really important to do. And I also want to say, and I mean this with no condescension, even though it always sounds like I do, work harder at it. And what I mean by that is practice on your own time with that person's name and pronoun if you have to. Think through why it's hard for you. Because the reality is you don't misgender cis people. You don't do it. And that would land weird or creepy depending on the context of who you're misgendering. Why is your brain letting you misgender a trans person or a non-binary person or whatever, however this person is identifying, whatever it is, why is your brain saying it's okay to mix that up? Because there's something unconscious in there that you can kind of work on in your own time. Don't make that person work on it with you. And that goes especially to bring it back to working with kids and like their dead names and things like that. Don't make that kid walk you through that. That's something you figure out on your own time. That kid's not your therapist. That kid is your chance to do better. So do better by doing better on your own. So practice that stuff in your own time. You're allowed, like parents especially have a lot of feelings when their kids come out because their like expectations for that kid's life has to dramatically change. And you can feel what you feel about that, but feel it on your own time, because your kid's not taking away your expectations. Your kid's giving you this gift and saying, I'm giving you another chance to know me. I'm letting you see me as who I really am. I'm giving you an opportunity to love me in reality as who I actually am, instead of this person that's been created by your expectations. And you're getting this beautiful second chance gift to have that relationship with that young person. So take that gift from them and build with them. Don't make them work on you. Work on your future together. All right, I'm off my box. That was that.
No, get back on it, Mel. I love that box. I'm gonna stack another one up under and make sure you fortify it and don't nobody come and knock you over, because that is goals, folks. Like Mel said, this Mel's a lot like me, so they just gifted you because honey, we're not gonna mince words. We are telling you all nice now. No, I'm just kidding. But does anyone else have any tips or ideas or way of what Mel and Tony both were talking about, are retraining your mind, and you can book all three of us in some CBT life coaching if you need some more support on how to do that if it's showing up too hard for you in your body. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah. For me, it would be shut up and realize that you have pronouns yourself. And realize that you wouldn't want someone to refer to you as a pronoun that you do not identify with. And just obviously you wouldn't be able to live in that situation as a cis person. You wouldn't understand that. But picture yourself in that person's shoes and think, okay, by me using the wrong pronoun, I'm ultimately hurting that person. So just shut up, reflect, and say, my fault. And when they tell you and they correct you, do exactly what Tony and Mel have been saying. Thank you, and refer to them by the correct pronoun. It shouldn't be that difficult.
And one more thing, if you go on to letsqueerthingsup.com, they list 10 things what you're really saying when you misgender somebody. It's pretty powerful. Check it out. letsqueerthingsup.com if you want to put it in the chat. I can't multitask.
Neither can I. I got ADHD. I'm Jahnice, do you have anything that you wanted to share?
No, I would just echo everything that's been said already. But really echo how harmful it is to force trans and non-binary youth to walk you through that process.
Yes. And as a cishet queer Black queer woman, normalize walking into spaces and saying, "Hey, what's your name? What's your pronouns?" To cis people, straight people, queer people, if you think they're queer, if they look dressed weird and so they dress queer, just normalize asking people their name and pronouns. Like we used to say, like you fill out on every piece of paper, what's your name and date of birth? What's your name and pronouns? Let's normalize that. And I also practice using folks' name. Like folks love for you to call them what their name is. And so if you're struggling and you don't want to erase a person, use their name. It'll be a good stepping stone while you're going on Let's Queer Things Up and figuring out why it is that you're really trying to erase this person. What's happening in your mind that's leading to you to be able to erase someone that is standing right in front of you.
Sorry. And also I just want to add this, like, it's not our preferred. I'm changing the language around that, okay? It's not my preferred name or pronoun. It is my name and it is my pronoun. It's not something like kind of like prefer you to use. So when I'm training now, I put chosen name and pronoun because it's, again, just for everybody out there that's listening, it's not a preferred, okay? It's a chosen. No, you didn't.
Because I was about to say,
no.
What are you talking about? Who have you been talking to? Because it's not.
No. It just came up in my head while you were talking, and I wanted to say it. So.
Like you prefer a favorite color. You have a name and pronoun. And for folks in the community, that's why I got really like aggrieved. Like, oh my gosh, like please, you need stop drinking coffee for today if you're talking about preferred pronouns and stuff. Sound crazy. But we're about to start closing, and I want to bring some joy, right? Like some good old queer, trans, non-binary joy in this space. And one, I want to firstly thank each and every one of you for the work that you do in Connecticut, and some of this stuff is outside of Connecticut. Some of us reaching our young people outside of Connecticut. So one, thank you for all that you do. Two, can you please take a second to plug your work, and because all of you have created spaces that, if they are not a queer-centered space, they are a queer safe space, and there's some kind of work in the community that you're doing. And so can you take a second to plug your work?
Sure. Should I go first? I'll go first. So,
Yeah.
so I'd like to just really quickly plug, of course, Healthcare Advocates International and the Youth and Family Program. We're really working super hard to create a really safe space for children and their families, but also through education programming and training. We're going to be going into schools and training, offering educators training, but also we're developing a program where we're going to go to elementary schools and talk to young kids about love and kindness and diversity. People are always talking about love and kindness. Nobody's talking about diversity. And for years, I've always said, if we can teach children about the differences in LGBTQ people actually exist, that bullying would organically minimize on its own. So we're in the process of developing that, and hopefully in a few months be able to go into our pilot schools and start talking to these little beings. But again, Healthcare Advocates International, it is also a health practice that sees LGBTQ plus people and other people 13 and over. So amazing organization, kind, compassionate, and I'm privileged to be a part of their team.
Mel, plug Q Plus really quickly for me, please.
Okay, cool. I guess the best way to find us is probably on Instagram at q.plus.ct, or we have a website. It's still being like worked on and made, so Instagram's honestly the easiest way, but you can check us out on our website too. I'm going to put that in this chat thing, and if it shows up, it shows up. If it doesn't, you can probably Google us and find us there. We have 3 social support programs each week. We have GSA programs, we have weekend open mics and adulting crash courses, which are basically like mini resource fairs held on Zoom about topics that youth are magically expected to know the day they turn 18, but we never talk to them about when they're younger than 18, because that's a really weird thing that we do to kids for some reason. So we have a lot of those kinds of things coming up. We're growing right now. We're expanding a lot. So we're definitely open to new program ideas. There's a lot of new social support groups we're trying to start up. So like, feel free to get in touch with us if you have ideas. We'd love to hear them.
Thank you so much. Jahnice?
Yeah, you can follow the Connecticut Black and Brown Queer Camp on Instagram, or follow the Citywide Youth Coalition. This week we'll be coming out with this year's Queer Camp application and flyers, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. We are expanding this year as well, so we have our regular 5-day camp for Black and Brown young folks, and then we're going to have an additional couple of days to make it a multiracial, multicultural space as well.
Christian, tell us about race.
So race, nonprofit organization fighting against racism. You can reach out to us on our IG, which is race.ct. And if you want to know a little bit more about the organization, you can also visit our website at race.net.
Thank you. And of course, last but not least, come to the New Haven Pride Center if you're interested in our mentoring program. We have open RSVPs to sign up for the trainings to become a mentor. We also are doing some cultural competency trainings as well. So email me, email JC, or email Patrick, or you can just email info@newhavenpridecenter.com, and you can make sure you .org rather. And you can make sure that you can get connected with us. We have amazing youth programs every Thursday. We are going to actually spread them out now because we have a very diverse, multi-generational space of young folks that are coming and gaining support. So if you are interested, please email me down there. And you can also find us on Youth NHPC on IG. You can always find us on Facebook. And again, you can find us at newhavenpridecenter.org at our website, and you can gain all this information there as well. Thank you so much for joining us with our panel today, Creating Spaces for Trans Youth. This is day 2 of Trans Week of Visibility. So you are going to be seeing some amazing and meeting some amazing folks in the community that are doing the work that is keeping all of us that you see on this panel alive. So thank you so much. Make sure that you contact these folks. This will be live if you needed to get those emails. And don't forget, you can donate to all of us. Thank you so much.